Hey everybody, another week, another discussion post. It's Phil and I'm back at it. I'm going to start with some of the keywords. The biggest one that stuck out to me from this week's readings was the entry on domestic. So right in the first paragraph it talks about the difference between tame and wild. And I thought, considering what we're talking about, research in indigenous peoples, deculling methodologies in our book here, that was the one that stuck out the most to me as like, well, this is really going to tie in here. So tame versus wild. They talk about domestication in binaries, and in that sense, it's limited in its meaning and context and how it really represents whatever it is that we're talking about. So being able to say, well, something is tame or wild, there's this spectrum of things in between that we're sort of losing. And I'm coming to terms or grasp with what's up with binaries, and why we talk about this. So it comes up so often in the things that we talk about. The book itself, I'm not going to lie, it was a lot to take in. There were so many examples. It seems to me that it's broken into two major parts. Part number one being all the different things that colonizers have done wrong to indigenous people over the years and in various situations, right? How have people that come in and take over and decide to do something different with the land or the space, how have we lost everything that was created or cultivated by the people that originated there, the indigenous people? Part two being the things that the descendants of colonizers can now be aware of to potentially fix some of the problems or act differently. This one was a little bit of like a tough pill to swallow a little bit. It feels like there's so many things or so many parts of history maybe that just, as a white person that I'm maybe just part of, and that is like inherently part of who I am, that I didn't necessarily have anything to do with. But now I'm finding out all these things that potentially done wrong. So that's tough for me. But I want to make sure that I tie some, in rereading some of the cultural theory essays, I wanted to tie the book back into Benedict Anderson's Imagined Communities. I kept thinking about that one as I'm reading sections of the book and thinking, well, kind of along the lines of, well, if there really are imagined communities, and that's all because of things like a newspaper or a medium coming in and everyone sort of collectively reading from that piece of media and sort of having this imagined collectivity, well then couldn't we also say that there's some imagined understanding of indigenous people, and that's why potentially there's these misunderstandings between what indigenous people find as insulting or as rude, or as hurtful, that maybe we have this imagined sense of what the relationship between domestic life and indigenous life might really be. I really found myself fascinated by the podcast, so I took several notes. The first thing that stuck out to me in the podcast was that tracking was a teaching in focus and discipline and carries forward in regards to knowing as much as possible about something in order to catch it. So the woman there is talking about growing up in an indigenous culture and learning from her father about tracking an animal, and that it's really so much more than tracking the animal. It's learning about focus and discipline. It reminds me of teaching my daughters how to play the piano, as not so much as so they can play a song when they're 50 years old. It's so that they have some lessons in discipline and practice and doing something every day and working at it even when it's hard. Another note, certainty is never really there because you can't know everything until you get to university, where the Western system tells you that you can in fact learn everything. So I think there's presented to us a very difference in indigenous culture versus Western culture, in that indigenous culture would say, well, you can't ever know everything. You have to constantly be learning, and there's always going to be more. But then in this woman's experience, getting to the traditional university system, it felt like you, in fact, as long as you take enough classes, as long as you read enough books, you can, in fact, understand everything. And finally, the presence of indigenous people reminds modern citizens that the connection to land is much different. An ontological disturbance was described. We have to fundamentally learn to tolerate differences, but it's always the domain of the other, not the dominant. So, wow, lots to unpack in all this. I'm really looking forward to talking about it with everyone in class and finding out everybody else's thoughts. So I'll see you soon.